Alright, guys, so things are going off the deep end again, and of course, the US is going to take the sanctions to the next level. Now, you would think that punishing India would be enough, but nope, Trump wants to go all the way. And if you want the main event, the main cause, well, it might just be around the corner, but before that, we need to talk about a prediction we made yesterday. Now, thanks to Trump punishing India, Modi is now moving closer to BRICS, and this includes talking trade with Brazil and, more importantly, getting closer to China. Now, India kind of realizes that playing both sides have limitations, and for the first time in 7 years, Modi is planning to visit Beijing. It's not really surprising, and it's becoming a tradition. Biden pushed Russia closer to China, and now Trump is pushing India closer to China. Now, how is this going to help the US? It doesn't. And remember that the whole world is watching. However, things are getting wilder, and now Trump is on a high. He now has the idea of punishing China for buying Russian oil. Now, sure, his advisors are saying it probably won't happen. Even Navarro is skeptical, but anything can happen. So, the tariff rate today on Chinese products is 30%. Trump could always double it to 60% in order to choke away Russian revenues because China does buy a ton of Russian oil. Now, it has been going on for over 3 years, and the amount of money being spent is enormous. Cheap energy is one of China's core pillars for manufacturing. It's the secret sauce that allows them to outproduce the world in manufacturing. And it's why Chinese EVs are dominating and why they will win a chip war once they reach tech parity. And it's something we have to understand on a fundamental level. In July alone, China bought over $10 billion of imports from Russia. There's a lot of oil going to Chinese refineries, subsidizing cheap power, and all sorts of industrial inputs. And listen to Navarro here. We have over 50% tariffs on China. We don't want to get to a point where we hurt ourselves. And this is a very big admission from the White House, and it's something that we have talked endlessly about. This is going to be a black swan event. But that is what makes it so dangerous. Now, the probability might be 5% or maybe even lower. But if this gets triggered, the entire US economy and global system will implode in a matter of days. It's not a hyperbolic claim, it just shows how the entire financial and trading system is wired. Every supply chain will break down, and again, the inflation in the United States will soar.
And keep in mind that we have over 50% tariffs on China already.
Okay. Right, but you could but they haven't been punished for buying Russian oil.
We have over 50% tariffs on China, so we don't want to get to a point where we actually hurt ourselves. Okay,
but so do you see what people are confused by that?
And I think I've given a really good answer to that. We've got tariffs of 50%, and we already have high tariffs on China. So I take your point.
So let's sit back and think about the blowback effects. What will China likely do in the event of a full sanctions war? Because punishing Chinese imports of Russian oil with tariffs is a form of a trade blockade. Now, firstly, will China let it happen? And what do you mean by let it happen? Well, China will just watch Trump slap them with double the tariffs and just trade elsewhere because it won't really affect them. It's water off a duck's back. Now, when the trade war started and escalated triple-digit tariffs, Chinese exports to the US did fall. It collapsed by over 30% at one point, and today it is still down by 21% even after the truce. Chinese exporters are selling less to the States, but overall trade in July still grew by over 7% year on year. The world is still buying Chinese goods, and as we said, is a big driver for China's economy. The world needs Chinese goods more than ever before to counter Trump's tariff war. And it's something that the White House is starting to appreciate. Our strategy is backfiring in real time, and it's all in the numbers. We are just making China stronger. However, it's important to war game this out because Trump is extremely unpredictable. Now, I can sit here and say there's a small chance of this happening, but when you roll the dice, when you throw the dice long enough, you'll end up with snake eyes eventually. So how will China retaliate? Now, what China will do with minimal effort that could cause maximum damage to the US economy is this. Firstly, is not de-dollarization. That is an ongoing process and it's a little too slow. What does it take to power the industry Trump wants? This is the critical question. Now, he's imposing semiconductor tariffs for a reason, right? The US Commerce Department just exposed their weakness. According to Greer, we are focused on making sure that magnets from China to the United States and the adjacent supply chain can flow as freely as it did before the control. And this statement is very important. The US doesn't just want direct rare earth imports to the US, they want the supply chain to the world to be restored. Why? So that prices will go down and the US can source Chinese rare earths from third-party suppliers. It's basically transshipment all over again, and I guess it's fine when the US does it. And in order for Trump to reshore chip factories to the US, he needs the rare earths. We have heard all the claims of Tim Cook getting domestic supply, but that won't be nearly enough. This is China's advantage, and we can be sure that this will be weaponized again, and the effects are going to be really, really severe. In May, the US imported only 46 tons of rare earths magnets. This rose all the way to 350 in June, so that's like a 9 times increase. But it's not nearly enough for Trump's chip war with the world. You can see that big collapse in Chinese magnet exports in April and May. Well, it could happen again. Beijing might restrict exports again to hammer US industries and break apart Trump's plan for reshoring chips. Now, will Trump really punish China for buying Russian oil? To be frank, it's very unlikely, but if it happens, we can expect that to break US industries. And to be honest, the US can't afford for this to happen, not at this point in time, because the very base of the financial system, the dollar, is now in crisis. Thanks to the trade war and the US Fed cutting rates eventually, the strength of the dollar is in question. Now, the 8 to 9% drop we saw over the past 7 months might just be the preview. Remember, asset prices like gold and stocks might be going higher, but it's the weaker dollar that's a big factor that's pushing prices up. According to Bank of America, fund managers are the most bearish on the dollar in over 20 years, even worse than back in 2005, a few years before the housing collapse, which means there are probably a ton of paper contracts, options, and negative bets happening on the dollar as we speak. Big money is betting against the USD because the outlook is just terrible. Now, the trade war is pushing countries away from the US. Less trade is happening, which means the demand for dollars is going down. US exports are struggling, and the tariffs will drive demand for foreign imports down as well. So now you have exporters scrambling to reroute supply to other countries, especially those in BRICS. And do you think countries like China will want to trade in the dollar? I think not. Another big reason we can't forget is the Federal Reserve. Now, this is a big one and it's coming really, really soon. In September, there's a 91.4% chance of a 25 basis points cut. So US bonds on the short end of the curve will be giving investors a smaller return. Normally, this shouldn't really move the dollar strength, but when you throw in all the madness, all the chaos, this will rug pull the incentive for investors to buy US treasuries. The demand for dollars could drop even further in a big way. Rate cuts are coming, and this does not bode well for the currency. Many banks and fund managers, they're still betting on the dollar falling. We have to pay attention to the catalysts that might trigger this disaster. And listen to this. According to UBS Bank, the outlook for the currency is negative and there are big risks holding on to US assets. This boils down to changes to the Federal Reserve Board. In addition, US economic data is looking really terrible. The tariffs are taking effect, which is making the general economy crack. It's important to separate fact from fiction. We have heard a lot from the Dream Team, especially Latnik. He's extremely excited for the incoming tariff revenue coming from Trump's trade war. But pray tell, who pays for the tariffs? The majority is from the consumer. This is nothing more but a private sector bailout underneath. That's how the whole scheme works. So you are siphoning off $1 trillion?
I think we're going to be heading towards $50 billion a month in tariff revenue that no one's talked about except for the president. So think about $50 billion a month, and that's where we are now. And then you're going to get the semiconductors, you're going to get pharmaceuticals, you're going to get all sorts of additional tariff money coming in. And as the president says, this could continue to head towards and ultimately reach $1 trillion. I mean, these are amazing numbers for the United States of America, and no one's retaliating. everybody understands you've got to sell to the American consumer. The American consumer is the most powerful factor in the earth for the economy, and Donald Trump is harnessing it.
So you are siphoning off $1 trillion to subsidize the federal government. People will get poorer, and you're gambling that this money will be used in productive parts of the economy. But if we just look at the tax bill, the outcome is quite clear. It benefits the people on top, and that's where the majority of the money is going to flow to. The rich will then buy more assets, and the wealth divide in the US will just widen. It's the same outcome that happened in 2008 and 2020, except this time it's the reverse Robin Hood plan. There's also another big hammer that could drop on both the US economy and the dollar. Now remember the trillions of dollars pledged in US investments, the money coming from Japan, EU, companies, and US tech firms. Well, what if those don't materialize? That might just implode the economy, confidence will be rocked. And here's the list of US corporate pledges, the ones that Trump is touting. We have $600 billion from Apple, $500 billion from Stargate, $200 billion from Nvidia, and $100 billion from TSMC. Now in total, if we include everything on this list, it should create at least 400,000 additional American jobs. That's the plan. That is the hope and dream. But is that even realistic? Now, half of the companies on this list, as well as many countries, are just waiting Trump out. Now, I'd be amazed if even a quarter of these investments materialize. And when they don't, this will come as a big shock to the entire system. You have tariffs and a weaker dollar making imports unaffordable. Buying domestic sounds cool except for the price tag. Next, employment promises could vanish, not forgetting countries are buying less from the US, so not a good end for the dollar. Finally, let's talk about the Federal Reserve and how Trump is about to send his Nazgul to the Board of Governors. This is very important because once the place is populated with his people, we can expect rates in 2026 and 2027 to drop down in a hurry. Now, Trump has nominated Steven Moran to serve as governor at the Fed. This is the architect, the person who drew up the framework for the global trade war. And what's worse is how Moran is in favor of a much weaker dollar. He loves tariffs and he wants the reserve currency to weaken. It's the good old argument of a weaker dollar means the US will export more. And once you understand this, you realize the board is being set up for a weaker dollar down the road. So yes, unless a catastrophic event happens like Trump sanctioning China, assets will continue to climb, not because the economy is fine, but because the currency of the world is in deep trouble. But let me know what you think. Will Trump really punish China over Russian oil? And will the US dollar fall down even further? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.